You ever watch a bulldozer roll across your land and realize you've just won? That's how my Tuesday morning started me, standing on the edge of my property with a cup of coffee and a grin on my face, watching the HOA lay down the first foundations of their dream community, right on land they didn't own. My name's Isaac Norwell. I'm a retired land surveyor with a healthy distrust of HOAs. I grew up around folks who believed in handshakes and fence lines, not fines for mailbox colors. So when the Briarwood Haven HOA tried to muscle in on my quiet 30-acre stretch outside town, I didn't get mad. I got patient. It all started 18 months ago when I got a visit from Barbara Bexley, the president of Briarwood Haven HOA. 60-something, wore a lemon-yellow blazer like it was body armor, and had that sharp tone you only hear from people who have never been told no in their life. "This land would make a wonderful addition to our community," she said, eyeing my field like it was hers already. "And we're expanding. You'll want to be a part of that." I didn't even answer. I just sipped my coffee and leaned on the fence. She must have taken that as a yes, because the next thing I knew, survey crews were stomping across the back acres, and I started getting mail from the HOA saying I needed to remove unauthorized structures from common property. They were talking about my barn, a barn that's been here since 1964. They thought I didn't own the land. See, this is where it gets interesting. Years ago, a developer tried to buy part of my land for a golf course. When the deal fell through, he filed a quitclaim deed that was never valid but ended up floating around in public records. Sloppy. Most folks wouldn't notice it, but I did, so when Briarwood Haven bought what they thought was 120 acres for their new subdivision, that bad deed made it look like 30 of those acres belonged to them. Except it didn't. Not legally. That land was mine. And I had the full chain of title, surveyed maps, and a court-certified property line to prove it. I could have stopped them when they broke ground, could have shut it all down. But I didn't. I let them build all 120 homes, roads, sidewalks, a clubhouse, even a tiny dog park. Because you don't stop a snake halfway through a hole, you let it crawl in, then seal both ends. The only thing I did. I put up a tiny sign on an old oak tree at the far edge of the property. It said, "Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted." That was enough to legally notify them. They ignored it. Now here we were, me, watching Barbara Bexley's face twist into a confused scowl as she stepped out of her shiny SUV and spotted me on the hill. "This is a construction zone," she snapped, marching toward me in her heels like she owned the dirt. "You're trespassing." "No," I said, holding up a folded map. "You are," she laughed once, short and sharp. "You don't understand. This is Briarwood Haven Phase 4. We've already sold 60 of these homes. You can't be here." I handed her the map and the court order. "I can." "And you're about to have a very long week." Her face paled as she read through the documents. Her hand trembled just slightly when she reached the part that listed the parcel numbers and saw hers weren't on it. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "I've had it for 15 years, I said. "Been waiting for someone to get greedy." Barbara didn't say another word, just turned around and stormed off, her phone already in her hand. I wasn't worried. I'd already spoken to my lawyer, the sheriff, the county assessor. Everything was lined up, and the best part. I had drone footage, dated photos, and signed notices showing that I gave them every opportunity to check the boundary. They didn't, because the Briarwood Haven HOA thought they could do whatever they wanted. And now, they just built 120 homes on my land. HOA story, HOA stories, Homeowners Association stories. Barbara didn't return to the site the next morning. Instead, her vice president, a hollow-eyed man named Craig Denton, showed up flanked by 2 attorneys and a clipboard thick with papers. He didn't approach me directly, just nodded once from a distance, then disappeared into a makeshift office trailer they'd dragged onto the property weeks earlier. I watched them from my porch with binoculars, jotting down names from their ID badges and noting every vehicle plate that pulled in. By noon, I had the county clerk on the phone. They filed a motion to quiet title this morning, she said, her tone already weary, claiming you never contested their ownership and that the land's effectively theirs by adverse possession. They're out of their minds, I replied. They've been here less than 2 years, and I've got registered surveys, tax records, and aerial drone logs showing they encroached knowingly. I figured, want me to flag it, do more than that, send a courtesy copy to Judge Halford's office. He oversaw the easement case for my southern boundary line. He'll remember me, she chuckled slightly. Oh, I'm sure he will. By that evening, I'd received an official summons. The HOA was trying to use a legal loophole they didn't understand. Adverse possession requires open, notorious, and hostile occupation of land for a minimum of 15 years in this county, and even then, the courts rarely grant it unless taxes have been paid consistently by the claimant. Not only had I paid every cent on time for 3 decades, but their construction permits were issued under parcels that didn't legally exist. They'd built on a ghost map. That Thursday, I met with my attorney, Dana Whitlock. She was a former land use prosecutor turned private litigator, and she'd handled 6 major property disputes in the last decade, all of which ended with her clients walking away richer than when they started. They're trying to strong-arm the court with volume, she said, flipping through the HOA's filing. Hundreds of pages, all fluff. If I didn't know better, I'd say they're trying to delay the inevitable. They sold homes built on land they don't own, I said. That's fraud, right? Worse. If they took payment on properties they had no legal title over, that could trigger criminal charges. Wire fraud, false statements to financial institutions, maybe even racketeering if they coordinated it knowingly. I let that hang in the air for a second. You think Barbara's smart enough to pull that off? Dana raised an eyebrow. No, but someone behind the scenes might be. That Friday, I paid a visit to the county archives and pulled every permit, plat, and deed transfer the HOA had filed since the expansion began. What I found buried in the zoning office's digital archive made my stomach flip. A notarized letter from a man named Louis Kendry, a licensed appraiser certifying that all properties in Phase 4 rested within the HOA's legal boundary. The problem. Kendry had died 6 months before the letter was dated. I took a photo of the document and sent it to Dana. This isn't just sloppy, I told her over the phone. This is forged. The silence on the other end was brief but heavy. I'll call the state licensing board, she said. And the fraud division at the county DA's office. By the following week, the story had started to unravel, quietly at first. The county paused inspections on half-finished homes. Real estate agents began pulling listings from online databases. And then came the first crack in the dam, a panicked voicemail from one of the homeowners. My name is Rachel Mayers, the voice said, fast and shaky. We bought lot 74 last year. Our mortgage company just called and said there's a title dispute. No one told us this land wasn't clear. What's going on? I didn't respond. Not directly. Instead, I called a town hall meeting. Reserved the old rec center on Maple Street and posted notices at the community bulletin board, the church, and the grocery store. Property rights and development transparency, open forum. Neutral enough to get people in the door, specific enough for the right ones to show up. When I walked in that Tuesday night, the place was packed, folding chairs filled, people standing along the walls, some wore construction vests. Others clutched manila folders. A few had the hollow look of folks who just realized they might have been conned. I stepped up to the podium and cleared my throat. Most of you don't know me, I began. My name's Isaac Norwell. I own the land your homes were built on. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone near the back muttered a curse. I didn't sell it. I didn't lease it. I didn't give permission, yet here we are. A man in a red windbreaker stood up. This has to be a mistake. We closed with a title company. We got insurance. How could the HOA sell land they didn't own? They couldn't, I said, holding up a stack of documents. But they did. And they based it on a forged appraisal, a misfiled deed, and a fabricated plat map that was never legally recorded. Dana stood beside me and handed copies to anyone who wanted them. Then she explained the legal implications calmly, clearly, without sugarcoating it. "You may be victims of fraud," she said. "And if you bought in Phase 4, your titles are clouded. That means you can't refinance, you can't sell, and if this goes to court, which it will, you could be forced to vacate until the matter's resolved." The room erupted, voices overlapping, anger, fear. Accusations. I let it roll for a minute before raising my hand. "I'm not here to evict anyone," I said. "But I'm not letting what they did stand either. You deserve to know what happened. You deserve to hold the right people accountable." That night, more than 40 homeowners signed a petition calling for an emergency audit of the HOA's financial records and development documents. Dana filed it the next morning with the County Oversight Board. By the end of the week, the HOA's treasurer had resigned. 2 board members followed, but Barbara, she dug in. She called a private meeting, tried to rally the Phase 1 and 2 residents to her side. Claimed I was a land baron trying to extort the neighborhood. That was her mistake. Because someone recorded the meeting, and in that recording she said something I couldn't have scripted better if I tried. He won't go through with it. He doesn't want the land, he just wants a payout, and if he fights, we'll bury him in court. He's one old man with a fence and a grudge. That recording made its way to the district attorney's office, and suddenly this wasn't just civil, it was criminal, forgery, fraud, conspiracy to mislead financial institutions. And obstruction, once they found out she'd shredded several internal memos instructing HOA staff to ignore boundary complaints. The sheriff's deputies showed up at the HOA office trailer the following Monday. Barbara didn't come out right away. But when she did, she didn't look so sure of herself anymore. They led her to the squad car without cuffs, but the cameras were already rolling. Reporters from 2 local stations had gotten tipped off. Homeowners watched in stunned silence. I stood across the street with Dana. "They'll probably offer her a plea," she said. "But the civil cases, that's where this gets real. You think we'll win? We don't need to win, Isaac, we just need to tell the truth. They built on the wrong land, lied about it, and now it's all on paper." I glanced back at the rows of homes. "Neat, identical, fragile. You know what's funny," I said. "If they'd just asked, I probably would have sold them the land." Dana looked at me. "Why didn't you?" "Because they assumed they could steal it, and now they were going to find out just how wrong they were." 3 days after Barbara's arrest, the county's Department of Building and Safety sent out an emergency inspection team to assess the structural integrity of the Phase 4 homes. Not because they suspected shoddy construction, though there were whispers of that too, but because there was now credible evidence that the HOA's contracted builders had operated without valid permits for most of the lots. Turns out, no one had cross-verified the parcel IDs before granting approvals. All they'd needed was one forged survey and a confident HOA signature. I didn't go near the site that day. I didn't need to. My phone lit up with messages from homeowners, contractors, and even a local mortgage broker. Word was spreading fast and panic had started to settle in. But I wasn't interested in their fear. I wanted answers. That afternoon, Dana and I met with Assistant District Attorney Marcus Vell at the county courthouse. Vell was a sharp-eyed man in his late 40s with a habit of flipping a pen between his knuckles when he was thinking. He didn't waste time with introductions. "We've got 3 felony counts pending against Bexley," he said, scanning a tablet loaded with documents. "Forgery, falsifying public records, and filing fraudulent financial disclosures. But the more we dig, the worse it looks." Dana leaned forward. "How deep are we talking?" Vell tapped the screen. "You ever heard of the Chesapeake Development Group?" I shook my head. "They're a shell company based out of Delaware. No employees, no office, just a P.O. box. But they're listed as the primary financier for Briarwood Haven's Phase 4 expansion. We traced 2 wire transfers totaling nearly $12 million from that group to the HOA's escrow account." Dana's jaw tightened. "And let me guess, no legitimate source for that money." "Correct. And here's the kicker, he said, flipping to another file. The signature approving the construction loan, it wasn't Barbara's. He turned the tablet so we could see. There, in black and white, was the approval form, signed by someone named Nathaniel Bryce. Title: HOA Compliance Officer. Dana narrowed her eyes. There is no compliance officer listed in their official board filings. Vel nodded. That's what tipped us off. We ran the name through state and federal databases. No bar license, no real estate credentials, no tax history. He doesn't exist. I felt a chill crawl up the back of my neck. So we're not just talking about a crooked HOA president. We're looking at a coordinated fraud ring, possibly laundering money through fake property developments. Dana exhaled. How far are you willing to go with this, as far as the evidence takes us? But we need your help, Mr. Norwell. I raised an eyebrow. You've got the clearest documentation of the land's rightful ownership. If we can prove they knew they were trespassing and built anyway, that's intent. That opens the door to conspiracy charges. I nodded. You'll have everything by tomorrow. Original survey, mineral rights, even the tax assessment logs. Vel smiled faintly. Good, because once this hits federal radar they'll want airtight evidence. The next morning, Dana and I prepared a binder thicker than a cinder block. We included every notarized deed, time-stamped aerial photo, and correspondence I'd collected since the first surveyor trespassed onto my land. We even added a copy of the drone footage showing the unauthorized grading work, complete with timecodes. That afternoon, we drove it straight to the district attorney's office. Vel met us in the lobby, accepted the binder without a word, and disappeared behind a set of double doors. By the end of the week, the FBI had joined the investigation. They started quiet collecting bank records, interviewing former HOA contractors, and pulling HOA board meeting minutes. But nothing stays quiet for long in a town like ours. Soon, agents were seen entering the Briarwood Haven clubhouse with laptops and sealed evidence boxes. Homeowners stood on their lawns, watching from behind curtains and porch railings. One evening, just after sunset, I got a knock on my door. It was Rachel Mayers, the same woman who'd left the panicked voicemail weeks earlier. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but she held herself upright. I didn't come to argue, she said. I came to ask you something. Go ahead. If this all falls apart, what happens to us? I paused. Depends on the courts. Some of you may be able to stay. Others might have to renegotiate new titles if the judge allows it. She swallowed hard. And if not, I didn't sugarcoat it. Then the land reverts to me, and technically the homes are illegal structures. She nodded slowly. I have 2 kids. We just moved here from out of state. School starts next month. We had no idea. I believe you, I said. But the people who did this to you counted on you staying silent. You're not the enemy. She blinked quickly as if trying to hold something back. What can we do? Testify. When the time comes, tell the truth. The more people speak up, the harder it'll be for them to bury this. She left without another word. But I noticed the next morning that a sign had gone up on her lawn. We demand transparency. Full audit now. By the end of the week, over 60 homes had signs just like it. Then came the subpoenas. The county grand jury issued them in waves, first to the HOA board members, then to the construction contractors, and finally to the third-party appraisers and title agents. One of the title agents, a man named Curtis Langley, cracked after just 2 hours of questioning. He admitted he'd been paid under the table to expedite clearances on parcels that hadn't been verified. Did you know the land didn't belong to the HOA? The prosecutor asked. No, Langley said, his voice shaking, but I strongly suspected something was off. They told me to push it through or lose the account. That admission opened the floodgates. Within days, 2 more contractors confessed to falsifying inspection logs. One engineer admitted to backdating soil reports. And then, the big one, an email trail uncovered by federal investigators showing direct communication between Barbara, a man using the alias Nathaniel Bryce, and a Delaware-based attorney who had since vanished. They were coordinating everything: land acquisition, document fabrication, even which homeowners to prioritize in sales to keep the cash flowing. It was a house of cards built on lies and arrogance. By the time the federal charges were announced, the town was buzzing. The DOJ held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Wire fraud, land misappropriation, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and racketeering. Barbara was denied bail. The board members who remained tried to distance themselves, claiming ignorance. But the documents told a different story: emails where they joked about squatting on Norwell's pasture and discussed clearing the paperwork later once the homes were finished. Meanwhile, the homeowners formed a coalition. With Dana's help, they began preparing a class action suit not against me but against the former HOA board and the fraudulent development group. They invited me to one of their meetings. I went, cautiously. It was held in a church basement. Folding chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups. A whiteboard covered in bullet points. Rachel introduced me, and for a moment the room went quiet. Then a man in the back stood up, older, with a veteran's cap and a hard set to his jaw. "You could have kicked us off your land," he said. "You didn't. That means something." I nodded. "I just wanted the people responsible to face the consequences." "Well," he said, folding his arms, "looks like they finally are." That night I sat on my porch and looked out over the fields. The lights from the Phase 4 homes shimmered in the distance, dim and flickering. For the first time in a long while, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid again. The trap I'd set had worked. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to be erased. And now, the people who thought they could steal my land, they were the ones losing everything. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air conditioning rattled like it was mid-July in a war zone, but in atmosphere. It had the sterile quiet of a place where people came to get stripped of their illusions. The walls were plain. The judge's bench was raised just enough to remind everyone who held the authority, and the gallery was packed with people who had once proudly called Briarwood Haven home. I sat in the front row, just behind the prosecution, beside Dana. She wore a navy blue suit that meant business and had a yellow legal pad in her lap that she hadn't looked away from in 10 minutes. Her pen moved constantly, as if she could will the trial into submission through sheer note-taking. Across the aisle, the remaining 3 HOA board members waited with their defense attorneys, all of whom looked like they'd aged 20 years in the past 3 months. Barbara was absent, her trial severed from the rest due to the federal charges. Everyone knew she would never testify. Her plea deal was still being negotiated behind closed doors, but the vacuum her absence left was palpable. Judge Halford entered with a firm nod and a gavel strike that snapped everyone to attention. "Court is now in session," he said. "This is the matter of State v. Denton, Glass, and Holloway. Charges include conspiracy to defraud, unlawful development on private property, and knowingly executing contracts on land not under their jurisdiction." Craig Denton, the acting president after Barbara's arrest, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His gray suit hung loose, and his eyes darted anywhere but forward. Holloway, their treasurer, kept clutching his tie like it would tighten itself into a noose. And Glass, well, she just stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a line so thin it looked like she'd erased her own mouth. The prosecution began with a slideshow of parcel maps, construction permits, and timestamps from the HOA's internal emails. It was methodical, brutal, and utterly void of theatrics. Every piece of evidence had been triple-checked, every timeline lined up. There were no cracks to slip through. When they brought up the altered zoning forms, the room tensed. The prosecutor, a tall woman with a voice like dry ice, didn't raise her tone once. "This document," she said, tapping the projection, "was submitted to the county planning office on March 3rd of last year. It bears the signature of a Nathaniel Bryce, listed as compliance officer. That position does not exist. The man does not exist. This was a fabricated identity created to rubber stamp fraudulent documents." Dana leaned toward me. Here it comes. The next slide was a screenshot of a wire transfer from Chesapeake Development Group to the HOA's escrow account. Then another. Then a list of homeowners and their mortgage lenders, all of whom had been misled into believing their properties were legally sound. Every financial institution involved in these transactions, the prosecutor continued, relied on falsified documentation provided by the HOA. This constitutes a pattern of deliberate deception, not a clerical error. The room was silent except for the scratch of Dana's pen. Then came the witnesses. They called in a former HOA secretary, a soft-spoken woman named Carla who had resigned 6 months before the scandal broke. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she described the meetings where board members dismissed concerns about boundary lines and skipped scheduled site reviews. I asked if we had verified the land purchase, she said. Barbara told me not to worry about it. Said it was handled through private channels. I didn't know what she meant, but she shut me down hard when I pressed. Next was the county appraiser, who admitted under oath that he had flagged inconsistencies in the property maps, but had been told by the HOA's attorney that it had been resolved internally. They waved a stamped survey in my face and told me the county didn't need to be involved. It had a seal, a signature. I didn't think to question it. When it was Dana's turn to present the civil side of the case, she didn't start with paperwork. She started with people. She called homeowners Rachel Mayers among them, who detailed how they were pressured to close quickly, discouraged from seeking outside inspections, and told any delays would result in losing their lots to eager buyers on the waiting list. They spoke plainly, some with tears, others with anger, but all with a shared sense of betrayal. Then Dana called me. I stepped up to the witness stand, swore in, and looked out at a gallery full of people who once thought I was a bitter old man with a grudge. I tried to warn them, I said. I put up signs, sent certified letters, I even confronted their surveyors, but they ignored me. So I waited. I kept my paperwork in order, documented everything. I wanted them to hang themselves with their own arrogance. The judge didn't blink at the phrasing. He just nodded for me to continue. They knew they didn't own the land. They just thought no one would stop them. The defense tried to challenge my credibility, of course, claimed my motivations were revenge-driven, said I had no standing because I hadn't taken immediate legal action the moment they broke ground. Dana objected before I could respond, and the judge sustained it without hesitation. By the end of the week, the defense had nothing left. Emails, bank records, and even a handwritten note from Denton himself found in a discarded planner sealed the coffin. It read, "Once it's built, they can't tear it down. Who's gonna fight us? Some retiree with a shed." On the final day, Judge Halford delivered his ruling from the bench. All 3 defendants are found guilty on all counts, he said. This court finds that the actions of the Briarwood Haven HOA board were not only negligent, but knowingly fraudulent. These were not oversights, they were strategic deceptions. He ordered immediate dissolution of the HOA's authority over Phase 4, placed all remaining assets under court-appointed receivership, and referred the matter for restitution hearings. Then came the part I didn't expect. The court recognizes that the land in question remains the uncontested legal property of Isaac Norwell. However, in light of the unique circumstances and the good faith efforts of the homeowners to cooperate with this investigation, the court will facilitate a process allowing residents to renegotiate lawful easements or purchase agreements under terms set by the rightful owner. That was me. I didn't stand or speak, I just nodded once. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dana handled most of the questions, speaking with the same clarity and precision she'd shown in court. I stayed back until one young journalist, maybe 25, asked something none of the others had. "Mr. Norwell, what would you say to someone facing a similar situation? Someone being pushed around by people who think they're untouchable?" I looked at her, then out at the crowd behind her, the homeowners. The onlookers, even a few former HOA members who now stood shoulder to shoulder with the people they once fined over fence heights. "I'd say let them think they won," I said. "Let them build their empire, just make sure it's on your land, and when the time comes, remind them foundations built on lies don't last." I turned and walked away. Weeks passed. The restitution phase began quietly. I met with each family individually, not through lawyers, not with threats, but with contracts that offered fair paths forward. Some chose to purchase their lots outright under newly recorded deeds. Others negotiated long-term leases that let them stay without fear. A few left, unable to reconcile what had happened, but most stayed. The land was mine. Always had been, but the community that had to be earned. Eventually, the last of the HOA signage came down. The clubhouse was repurposed into a neighborhood center, run not by a board of enforcers, but by volunteers. They invited me to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. I declined, but sent over a hand-carved wooden sign to hang above the door. It read, "Built on Truth." And that was the end of it. No more fake officers. No more forged surveys. No more power games disguised as community standards. Just people, learning how to live together, on land they now knew better than to take for granted.